I did a little bit.
You win. So what?
Yep, I got others to join.
You don't have any cam. So if they had turned the cameras on.
Camera,
Whatever defaults.
I bet is the USB cable. If are the cameras above?
Oh, maybe.
bet-
Oh, maybe
I bet
that's
it's that.
that's probably this one.
Yep.
At least we get a go with that.
Okay.
Give it to that. You're welcome. Testing. That works, Evan? Let's do audio test with the online people.
This is Secretary Schultz. I can hear you.
Oh, thank you, Secretary. Can you hear me?
Yep.
This is Alex. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Are you going to share your screen for the presentations? Okay, cool.
Good afternoon, Selena. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Kenny.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Cameras up. All ready? Okay. We'll call the ITEC meeting to order. And we'll do the roll call. Selena?
Kelly
Salina's here.
O'Brien,
Yes, here.
Jeff Maxon, Alan Weiss,
Here.
Email Berquist, Pam Curtis, J.R. Clays, Jeff Pittman, Adam Prophet, Amber Schultz,
Present.
Adrian Guerrero. Lynn Retz will not be here. David Marshall, Greg Gann, Mike Maida, Murray McGee, Steve Bunk, John Berghaus,
John's here.
and Alex Wong. Jeff Pittman,
All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. So take a motion for that. So moved. Moved by Greg. Is there a second? Second by Steve. Any discussion on that? All right, all in favor of the agenda, say aye. Opposed, no. All right, the agenda is approved. The minutes from the December 19th meeting was mailed out yesterday. Hopefully you all had a chance to look at that. And I would entertain a motion for approval of the minutes. Moved by Senator Pittman. Is there a second? Second by Adrian. Any discussion on the amendments or minutes? All right. All in favor of the minutes from the December 19th meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All right, the minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda is the action item status, and that's Alex.
Thank you, Adam. There is one action item from the September ITEC meeting from last year, and it is requested by Senator Pittman to have the Secretary of State office to present on the election fraud prevention subject. And we have Brian Caskey here on site to do the presentation today. So that action is considered as completed. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Alex. Next item is the advisory board updates and education segment. That's Jeff Maxon.
Good afternoon. This is Jeff Maxon, Executive Branch CTO. Our last ITAB meeting was relatively brief, and again, kind of give an update on some current things happening within Executive Branch, such as our, excuse me, some of the things that Alex will cover today, our IT job title standardization project, as well as kind of what was going to be seen coming into this upcoming legislative session. So obviously we're now well into that as well. So, but again, very high level ITAB meeting. We did briefly touch on some of the policy updates and also asked for volunteers as we'll be looking at reviewing some more of the ITEC policies as a whole. So again, a relatively quick ITAB meeting, but again, just touching base on a few things.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Under presentations, the legislative update, that will be Ally Denning.
Hi, everybody. This is Ally Denning. So just a few legislative pieces I wanted to give a quick highlight over about what's been going on this session. A few key things we're following. First is House Bill 2745. For those of you who have not been following it, what it does is it eliminates licensing fees for military spouses. One of the reasons we're following it is because with Alex Wong and the work that his team is doing on enterprise licensing, we just want to be aware of this bill as it might impact some of that work. We do not have any concerns, though. It's something, again, as we're working through that process, it's just something for us to be aware of. The other piece in relation to the budget for both OITS and the KISO, one of the key things we asked for this year is both money and FTEs in regards to a 24/7 security operations center, as well as 2 roles, one for a chief privacy officer and one for a chief data officer. At the moment, that has been included in the Senate's budget. And then on the House side, it has made it out of House appropriations. So we're just looking to see where things land there. And then the third and final piece, and this might be something that quite a few of you have heard about recently, the bill was just introduced Friday in the House, and there was a hearing on it yesterday, both are in legislative modernization, and that is House Bill 2842. It is an IT and cybersecurity bill. One of the major premises of it is that it does consolidate a lot of IT functions within their each respective branches. So again, that bill just came out on Friday, had a hearing yesterday. The committee itself has talked a lot about a need for amendments that'll probably need to occur. And so they will be working that bill tomorrow morning in legislative modernization at 9 a.m. So I strongly recommend following that and listening in on what they're working on. We have had an opportunity to provide our own feedback on it. But again, it just came out. And so we're just keeping an eye on it, but it's still in those early stages.
All right, thank you, Ally. Next on the agenda is election fraud prevention, and we have Brian Caskey with us today from the Secretary of State's office. So Brian's going to give us a presentation. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you. There we go. Everybody can hear me okay? All right. First, again, my name is Brian Caskey. I'm the Director of Elections for the state of Kansas, and I work for Secretary of State Scott Schwab. With me in the back, I brought Altaf Uden. He has been on the job for approximately 36 hours as our new Director of Information Technology. So he's been very busy, but we're happy to have him and thought he would hopefully hear a few things today about our operations. We appreciate the opportunity to be here today to provide an update on election security, fraud prevention as it relates to information technology, digital voting equipment, and storage of voting information and ballots. My remarks will touch on each of these topics briefly, as well as the designation of election administration as critical infrastructure. Kansas has a decentralized election administration structure, with counties actually conducting elections and the Secretary of State's office playing a limited role, which is limited by both state and federal law. We primarily give advice to counties and we perform specific tasks that are outlined in law, but counties in this state run elections, which is it's not unique to Kansas. A lot of states have a decentralized structure, but I think it's helpful in what we can and cannot do. Relating to critical infrastructure, on January 6th of 2017, the Department of Homeland Security designated U.S. election systems as part of the nation's critical infrastructure, a decision that was later affirmed again by Presidents Trump and Biden and remains in effect today. This designation provides greater access to DHS services and personnel and provides a safer exchange to allow us to receive information about threats to our system. It gives us access to DHS resources, both personnel and policy, and it provides assistance in a critical infrastructure area. So prior to that, we didn't, I won't say security was not important. It was not nearly as important as it was with that designation. I did not have a lot of dealings with DHS prior to that designation. Now, if I go 48 hours without talking to someone from DHS, it's a miracle. Like we are intertwined at all times. But to me, it's a good thing. We are much more secure now than we were prior to that designation. So currently, we have multiple employees who have sufficient security clearances that we have real-time access to every threat that's known against our election systems. We also use DHS resources. I'm on a weekly call with Kansas DHS personnel. I'm on more often calls with DC DH personnel, and we have used several of their free services when it comes to assessments and review of our system. We do that at least annually, if not more. So we consider DHS a critical partner with the Secretary of State, and one that I think has brought some value to us since that designation. Next, I want to talk just a little bit about our information technology. There's basically three things that I want to focus on: the security of our voter registration system, the security of county tabulation software, and then the security of our election networks. Now, I'm not going to get into any kind of specifics, but just kind of a high level, this is what we're doing. So with the statewide voter registration system, it is administered by the Secretary of State's office. It is housed by us, and each of the 105 county election offices access the system. The vendor is a nationally recognized vendor, and they have industry-leading security measures, both internal and external. In addition to their security measures, we have partnered with a different nationwide leader in cybersecurity protection and incident response that provides another layer of security that's distinct from the vendor and from us and from DHS. So we have DHS review, we have a private vendor, and we have our voter registration vendor. And we have this both in our office and in each of the 105 county election offices. The state currently pays for all of those services. The counties are not paying into that specific piece, but we've had that for almost 4 years, if not longer, on the current contract. And so we believe that we have as good of protections as anyone. We do use multi-factor authentication. We know every single computer that touches our network. We know who's at the keyboard. They are assigned a specific security piece to access our system. So we believe that we are as good of protected as anyone, knowing full well that as soon as I say that, we are already behind the curve. But I believe that we are partnering with everyone to be in as good a place as we can. Next, I want to talk about the actual vote tabulation software, the software that actually counts the votes. The state has no role in actually using the software. Counties make the purchasing decision and operation decisions of all pieces of vote tabulation equipment. Back in 2005, at our urging, the County Election Officer Association passed a resolution that forbid any piece of voting equipment to touch the internet. So in Kansas, we've had a policy since 2005, no device that counts votes, tabulates votes, or marks a ballot can touch the internet. That's been since 2005. In 2021, the Kansas legislature passed a law putting that into law. So it's not a policy now, it is a law. But we haven't had any piece of equipment touch the internet in almost 20 years. Not every state is like that. In fact, some states have machines that are required to touch the internet because that's how they transmit results from their local offices to the state. So not everyone has that. I'm not going to denigrate other states' policies, but here I want to be clear: our equipment does not touch the internet, and it has not in over almost 20 years. We also right now are promulgating new security regulations that will go into effect around the middle of May that add additional security requirements on the counties. These include some of the vote tabulation devices have in their network adapters that are inside their equipment, this regulation requires them to be disabled. Not just not used, it has to be disabled. Each staff member that uses any type of machine has to have their own unique credentials. You can't have one just for the office. Every single person who touches it has to have their own credentials. We log every touch by any person on any piece of either vote tabulation software or on ballot marking devices. There's a computer that tabulates the results from each of the vote pieces of voting equipment. It comes into the central office. That computer must be in a secured room with controlled access and computer access at all times. And I already mentioned this, but then a log of every touch on every piece of machine. So a lot of counties already do this. Every county will do this starting around the middle of May this year. And then the last part of this is that each county is responsible for accessing their county-owned networks. Like the state doesn't have a network. Each county is responsible for securing that. However, we have partnered with a nationwide cybersecurity company, and we have both detection services, remediation services, and basically 24/7, 365 watching of every device in every county as it relates to elections. So although they're responsible for it, I hate to tell them, they know this, but Big Brother is watching every single thing at all times. So that if you have a county employee that isn't as dedicated to avoiding spam or any kind of threat or attack, either email or we are right on top of them. So we are constantly watching everything. There's that. I do want to talk a little bit about electronic poll books. Electronic poll books are used in over 70 of our 105 counties. These are devices that contain the voter registration database, and if you vote in a county that has it, when you check in on an electronic poll book. This is not a voting device. You don't use this to cast a ballot. We don't track anything other than, hey, yes, I'm registered to vote, and yes, this is a ballot I have. Those electronic poll books are connected to the internet on purpose to prevent someone from voting at more than one location on the same day. So you will hear people complain that our voting systems are on the internet. That is not true when it comes to any device that touches a ballot, marks a ballot, counts a ballot. Electronic poll book is not a voting device, but we absolutely are connected to the internet on purpose so that we can deter anyone from voting at more than one location on election day. A little bit more about voting equipment. Just generally speaking, the federal government through the EAC, the Election Assistance Commission, certifies voting equipment at the federal level first. After they do a certification, they basically have a vendor come in, give them their equipment, and then they hire a third-party lab that basically tears that equipment apart and looks for any kind of vulnerabilities, tests it. It's called an independent testing authority. There's 2 of those in the country. So you have to go to the EAC first. You have to get approval by this independent testing lab, and then you come to Kansas, and then we will review those reports, and then we will certify a piece of voting equipment. So there's no equipment in this state that's ever been used that hasn't been certified by the federal government and gone through an independent testing lab review. So I think that we do a pretty good job there. The federal government has been updating their standards on voting equipment. They're called the Voluntary Voting System Guidelines, if you've heard of it, VVSG. They just adopted version 2.0 in 2021. To date, there are 2 vendors that have submitted a type of device to the EAC for review. They have not yet passed the first review. So there will be no equipment anywhere in the country that meets the 2.0 standards. We are hopeful that we will have some for 2026, but everything that we have, the federal government still stands by. It's a secure, it's industry leading equipment, just like everyone else, but that's where we are, and we are hopeful to get the next generation of voting equipment in time before the 2026 election. And with that, that's kind of the highlights I wanted to give on how we're securing everything. I am happy to answer questions about this or anything else anyone has.
Any questions for Brian?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Adrian from the Board of Nursing. A couple questions. What happens to the devices when you're done with them? Do they retire them in a certain way or are they destroyed?
So at the end of life of the devices, it's up to the county. Again, these are county-owned devices. So there's a process where they can return them to the vendor as part of a, it depends on their contract. If they have a lease, they can return it for a newer version, or if the vendor doesn't want it, they are destroyed. But again, that the county has to do that. The state, there's not a law at the state level that says thou shalt do this. It's up to the county. But those are the two things that happen.
Okay. And then you mentioned there's two companies that do the certifications. Is there any sort of testing of that throughout the cycle to see if they're still in compliance, or is it that just a one and done kind of thing and then they're out into the field?
No, so the EAC, the federal agency that oversees this, they do, I'm going to get the time period wrong. They do a periodic review of the independent testing labs to make sure that they have to be certified to be an independent testing lab. And so there is a period of time where they have to be renewed and maintain their accreditation. I don't know what the time period is. I'm sure I can find out, but it's not one and done. There's a period of time where they have to be reaccredited to make sure their processes are up to snuff.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation.
But thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Pittman?
There was a report out about, I only heard about it on the floor, but can you talk about anything that happened in Cherokee County maybe 2 years ago or a year ago in terms of votes getting flipped? Is that a true story?
Yes, I can talk about that. In the August 2022 primary election, Cherokee County made a ballot programming mistake when they were programming their ballots before the election. They basically made a mistake. When they were doing their testing, let me make sure I have the timeline right. So they made a mistake on the first day of advanced voting. Someone caught the mistake, notified them. They said, okay, thank you. They corrected the mistake. However, they did not update their testing deck when they went to test voting machines. So prior to every election, there's a public test where they test all their equipment in part to catch problems. So they made a programming error discovered on the first day of advanced voting, fixed the programming, did not fix the test deck. So they reintroduced the problem on the public test prior to election day. Went through election day, the votes were tabulated incorrectly. During the post-election audit, where you count everything by hand, it was discovered again that they did not fix the election day problem correctly. So the post-election audit caught that the results were, the tabulator was not programmed correctly. And then the county clerk, on our advice, hand counted every single ballot in the county for every race to make sure that every ballot and every race was counted correctly. That makes sense.
Senator Pittman?
Thanks for that, Mr. Kraske. Is there any process that's in place by your office, or is there anything that we should be considering to help prevent this kind of thing? Obviously, that undermines confidence in elections. Programming mistake is, we all know things happen.
Right.
When we hear programming and county officials, you think, well, how sophisticated is the programming? Is it really hard to do? Is it easy to do? Is it just a configuration that somebody didn't set up the machine correctly? Are there processes that will make sure the public knows that this we have learned from this somehow and won't happen again?
Sure. No, it's a great question, and one that I've spent, I will say, hundreds of hours obsessing over. So two things. The most important thing is that the reason why we have a post-election audit by hand is for this. Like the post-election audit worked, where after election day, we randomly select a few races, and every county selects a few precincts, and they count every ballot in those areas and compare them with the machine count. Part of the purpose of the audit is to make sure that the votes are being counted correctly. So one, I think it re-emphasized how important the post-election audit is. But more importantly, I think, is that our office we've hired former Johnson County Election Commissioner Connie Schmidt, and she has written some guidelines, and we're going to issue some more guidelines on what does an effective test look like. Counties often have relied on their vendors to do their pre-election test, in part because either they don't have enough time or staff or quite frankly, knowledge. So our office is going to hand them scripts that the county can do independent of the vendor, which I think will allow them a better shot of finding errors on their own without being so reliant on the vendor. I think there are some counties that frankly need to be a little more independent in the testing process. So that's one of our takeaways was we're going to give them scripts and not rely on the vendor to catch that.
And the last question is, when you mentioned the random audit, I remember putting that in place actually in statute that we would do that. But if we hadn't done that random audit, would this have been caught? I mean, or would this have been caught with the standard process? Let's say that it hadn't been selected.
Right.
They still have to go through a precinct count, right?
Yes.
And that would have been the catch, supposedly.
It is my belief it would have been caught independent of the audit. Each county has internal procedures to go through and review election results, regardless if there's an audit or not. And so over the history of our state, like the last 150 years, there have been similar programming mistakes in the last 150 years that have been caught independent of the audit. I think the audit just makes it much easier and much clearer. But it is my belief they would have caught it anyway. But it's easy to say that when you take out like a big process out of the middle of it. So
Thank you. So it doesn't sound like we need to throw out all of our tabulation machines and all of our digital machines, from your opinion?
I believe that our tabulation machines are as accurate and secure as anyone in the nation. And we've heard from people that think that we should go back to hand counting paper across the board. And I will tell you in my experience that hand counting any set of ballots is the least efficient, most susceptible to error of any counting method. Like we've done our own test. We've looked at other states. That Osage County, Missouri did a hand count in a local race in 23, and the county clerk swore that she would never do it again. It took her what would have taken about 3 to 4 hours of running every ballot through their scanners. And this is a small county, like 3,000 to 4,000 people, not very large. That normally would have taken 3 to 4 hours on election night. It took them all election night, and they didn't get done until the next day, and they still didn't agree on what the numbers were. Like hand counting is just inherently slow and inaccurate. I just like to remind people, our machines don't connect to the internet. The only way that you can do anything is to program them, and counties do that independent of the internet. You have to touch it. It's in a secure room. It's logged. When it's not election time, they're in a secure facility. Like we log every time anybody touches the machine. So it is my belief that that is the most efficient, most accurate way to count votes in the state.
Any further questions? All right. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you very much.
Next on the agenda is IT job title standardization. Alex?
Thank you, Alan. Good afternoon, everybody. So I have that job series map ready. I might switch to that file as well. Thank you. All right. Afternoon, everyone. I'm Alex Wong, Chief IT Architect, State of Kansas, and I'm here to talk a little bit about some of the work that we have done since last August, September timeframe in regards to standardizing some of the job description and job titles for IT jobs specifically. And Jeff has mentioned about this in previous meeting about some of the work that this working group already does. And I wanted to take this opportunity to share some of the work that is already completed and also talking about what phase 2 is going to look like, what the end goal is going to look like, especially with ITEC as a group to set standardization policy and procedures. I think it is very valuable to collect feedback from this group so that we can fully understand the extent of the standard and the information that we have produced to make sure that you will fit in a border range. Next slide, please. All right, so in today's meeting, we're going to talk about first introduce the working group members, like who are the people that's participating in this effort. And then we'll talk about a little bit on background, some current limitation of why are we running into issues today, what are those, and what are the things that we're trying to do to overcome some of those limitations. The goal of this project some of the objectives that we're doing both in phase 1 and in phase 2. And then the next two items, the job architecture and the job series map, are some of the product that we have produced in phase 1. So we'll walk through that a little bit more detail to show you the work that we have done. And then we will talk about some timeline of where we are heading, some of the action items that we're going to take on the next step, and take any questions that you might have. Next slide. So in order to engage a topic like this, we understand that we need 3 major components. One is we need Department of Administration HR, which is our central HR participation. So you will see Danielle, Craig, and Vicky from DAPS. Those are all Department of Administration Personnel Services representative to help us understand the current architecture, the current format of job titles, and how are they fitting into the system that we're using. Understanding that we're talking about state title here, meaning that it's not just judicial, executive, legislative branch, but it also includes region school and any other employee that we consider a state employee. So the range is really broad. So we make sure that we have somebody from Central to talk about that from a central perspective. And then we have cabinet agency, which employs a majority of our IT employees. And we also extended it to non-cabinet agency and very specifically region schools. So you will see Doug Poston from Empire State University and Vicky Koloski from University of Kansas also participate in this effort to talk about how they are currently using the job titles and how this working group can gather those information and feedback from all these areas to produce a new set of information. Next slide. So background and limitation, I think most of you have dealt with this in your individual entity where the state title is very generic. It can be like an IT programmer or an IT manager or an IT director, but it really doesn't really specify the type of work that the person do. And because of that, a lot of the time what happened is that could be an employee that have a position or the title that really doesn't match up with what they do. We also see areas where there are non-IT employees using IT titles solely because they needed to bump their rate to a higher rate, etc. So we know that we need to be a little bit more specific on the titles that we're going to create in the new era. So then the next thing that we are doing is also the limitation is that there are a lot of difficulties in market study. I know that one of the challenge that we have in state employee, not just IT employees, is sometimes we are a little bit behind from the market study range. And there's multiple effort in the previous years in this administration that try to look at market study in the regions and in the areas surrounding us to see if we can match some of our position with those compensation studies. However, because of the limited variety and the generic of our IT job titles, it makes it really hard to do an apple-to-apple comparison. We almost have to like fit a whole bunch of positions into a title that we might fit in and use that to do market study, which is very difficult to do. I kind of touched on the inconsistency earlier, meaning that to extend a little bit further, because we have different job requirements for those positions as well. So sometimes when you compare a job skill set of somebody in an agency that is called Programmer 1 versus another agency that use the same title, they might have completely different skill set and their qualification could be completely different. And that generates a lot of inconsistency with what those level means and also what are the career path or what are the career development that we can provide for those positions because we are not clear across the board. And finally, because of all the points that I've mentioned earlier, there really is not a clear career path across all the agency. Most IT employees can see their path within their agency. So if there is an opening within their own organization, they know whether or not they can move up to those positions or whether those positions are lateral to what they are doing today. Through this project, we're hoping to build a statewide career path for all IT employees for the state of Kansas. So you can clearly see where you are in specific family, not based on agency anymore, but also what are the requirements that can help you move to the next stage. So you can clearly define your career development plan to match up with those requirements that we've identified, to both have in-place promotion and also looking at career path all the way from the bottom level to the highest level. So that is the some of the objectives that we set up to accomplish. Next slide. So in short, the goal of this project is standardization of state IT job titles to create consistency, clarity, and fairness within the executive branch. So you can see that right now we are limited to just executive branch first, but obviously the scope is going to change as we continue to adopt. But we look at executive branch first just because this is a more chewable size. We can actually have control of over on some of those titles that we can create or backfill to use it as a pilot program as well. So that's the scope currently, but it doesn't mean that we don't have a broader view of eventually using the same model for the rest of the state. So again, we emphasize some of the benefits that we want to raise from this specific working group. Recruitment and retention is big. I mean, you hear that all the time from all the different IT leaders that it is hard to recruit. It is hard to find good people and also keep them, right? So that's definitely the first thing that we want to utilize, leverage this exercise to find the right job title, create the correct or accurate job requirements and description, and then eventually build a salary range that utilizing market study to put them in the right place so we are competitive with other private and public organizations around us. Then the other thing that we wanted to also do through this exercise is to avoid competition between agency. We see some of those because we wanted to find the right people for the job, and sometimes agency will change their requirements to create more competition and also outbid each other. So we're trying to also level set and set up the baseline in the same range that everybody have to apply to, so we don't create internal competition. So those are some of the sub goals out of this main goals that we are set up to. Next slide. So objectives. So I kind of mentioned that there are two different phases that we're working on. So since last July to about last month, we are working on phase one. So we are concentrating on unclassified position only at this point. We are not making any modification or recommendation on classified position through this exercise. So unclassified position only, and at the phase one, we only touches professional job titles. So what that means is not managerial. Right? So people that is doing the work, they are not in the managerial side, they are not leading people, they are not directors or chiefs, and they are mainly doing the groundwork that we need from the daily basis. So through that exercise, we identified approximately 58 to 60 job titles. And this is not including the different levels that we have set on each one of those positions. It is also doesn't include any managerial positions. So you can see that we are trying to diverse and be more specific into the actual work that the IT job actually does. Use that to create the description and requirement for those positions as well. So backtrack one step. We don't have all this information. So we actually reach out to a company called Mercer, where they provide, they're specialized in not just IT industry, but just employment in general for not only the state, but global as well. So we are utilizing some of their annual report. When we started this effort, we're using the 2022 report, and we have now switched to 2023 report to look at the job titles that they've created and the industry standard for those, the name of the title, the description of those titles, and the requirements for them as well. So that is phase one. Starting from this month, the working group is regathering and start to look at the leadership positions. So we just earlier talked about managers, directors, and above. Looking at also the different levels, like if we have determined the level one of the position, what are the requirements for the level twos and the level threes? Because those levels is it directly impacting the promotion and the career path of IT job positions. And then at the end, we are going to determine the salary range for those positions. so we can create a comprehensive job map for the state of Kansas. Next slide. So with that said, this is some of the result that we have already created through phase 1. So you can see the first step that we do is to create job families. So going back to earlier about we wanted to see jobs crossing agency and not just limited to a specific organization. So we are creating families based on the need of the state. So we end up with 6 at this point. Eventually there will be a 7th, which is the leadership family. But since we haven't touched that part yet, so you only see 6 at this point, which are application, infrastructure, support, security, operation, and architecture. And those are some of the sample job titles within those families to give you a little bit more substance of what some of the job titles might be like within those job families. Noted that we are also providing a path for moving job families. So you can start with a support family doing some workstation support work. You can actually see a path of that moving into an application family or moving into an infrastructure family per se. So that's all something that this group is working on to make that happen. So next slide. So each individual family, in this case, we use security as our example here, have the baseline entry-level job titles. So you see IT security analyst 1, IT risk and compliance officer, data security analyst 1, and cyber information assurance analyst. Those are entry-level for one of those pillars, and the working group then decided, based on the needs of everybody, not just specific agency, whether they need progression within those specific titles. So you see security analyst, the next progression of it is security analyst 2, and the next progression of it is IT security engineer, right? So you can also see that once this is done, it is not stuck in this specific job family, that you can actually move to a different family, such as architectural family, if you wanted to maintain as a profession, or a manager or director or a CISO position, if you're moving to the managerial path and so forth. Can you pull up the IT job map for me? So you will see in this presentation at the bottom that I have left a link that's also in your package for the PDF files, that you will see the full job map of what we have created. So if you see on this page here, this is the one of the 3rd page of the application family. So you see PeopleSoft programmer positions, you see IT programmer positions. Scroll down. So you will see this is the 2nd page of the application family, including database administrator, application administrator, and so forth. Next page. So I'm not going to keep going for the other families, but you got the concept where we're looking at specific jobs that is starting to spread out, right? Web developer, right? Different than programmer, right? Programmer. If you have IT people that's doing QA, they're not IT analysts, they're QA, right? So you see the specification try to start to play out. This information is in the link, so feel free to look at all the different family and all those 50-some job titles that we've created. And again, the 50-some does not include the levels that's going up. Including those levels, we are around 100 at the moment for the individual job titles. Next slide. Yep, we can say this slide at the moment for a moment. So when it is all said and done, you will see individual family that is actually horizontally expand. Then based on that, you will see like this bottom level, like right now we have, but everything that is sit on the same level will have the same similar salary range. So you will have a sense of where is the different job actually slot into, right? And based on that, you will start to see a progression of career path that you can go from a lower level, and it might be that and other families lowest level is the progression for you to go into become a higher pay position and start that path from there on as well. So you eventually will see a map that is not all at the base level, but a map that is actually moving up and down like a primate per se. But that is going to be the eventual outcome when it's all said and done. Next slide. So we started the kickoff back in last summer. We completed phase 1. Some of the work that you have seen so far is what we have done since then. And then we are starting the phase 2 process this month. And like I mentioned earlier, creating job requirements so that people know like what are the minimum requirements that they need in order to be in that position and also produce that career path that they need is what we're going to do in this phase. We are hoping to complete it in the May-June timeframe. Hopefully we'll come back again and show you all more the work that we have done more comprehensively at that point. And then we will talk about how do we communicate, how do we adopt, what are the things that this group can help to also spread the message and provide feedback on that as well. Next slide. So at the moment, immediate next step, asking for any feedback that you might have. So feel free to reach out to me directly or anybody that is in the working group that you might work more closely with. Share your information, feedback with them, let them know how that might or might not work with you for your organization. Obviously, the more that we can build this, the more that we can see all the IT job as a whole and not fracture as the current state that we have right now. Then the next thing is, especially in the executive branch, I know Jeff has already started to utilize some of those new job titles, requirements, and description for any positions that is being turned over within the OITS organization. So we are using that to practice and see how that works out and whether it fits or not. So again, utilizing this opportunity to promote this as well. So if your agency or your unit wants to share some of this information and want to know how to adopt it, please reach out to me directly. More than happy to sit down with you and go through more detail, like individual jobs and individual requirements and all those things with you based on your needs. Next slide. That's all I have.
Questions for Alex?
Adrian.
Adrian with the non-cabinet agencies. Thank you for the presentation, Alex. You guys are doing a great job getting all of this together.
Thank you.
Do have a few questions
Yep.
though. In looking at some of the titles, for example, the PeopleSoft programmer is specific to a type of software.
Correct.
And the state, I know, realize they currently utilize PeopleSoft, but if in the future that was something else, how would they be able to make that change? Would it just be something across the board? They would
Yeah.
become AGP programmers, let's say, or
Yep.
whatever it happens to be. So that would. does
So
that mean that
I'll answer your question in two ways. So one is a specialized answer. PeopleSoft programmer is so different than other ERP systems. And so in the Mercer report, they really just spells out a specific product because their skill set is just so unique to their own. I'll give you another example. Mainframe administrator is similar, that they are very specific to that. And they also share the second answer that I'm going to share with you, which is end of life. At some point, they might no longer be valid. And we will at that point sunset those job titles. As with any other job titles that you might see currently that we put in, we are subjected to review and sunset those and slot those into other job titles as they continue to attrition. That's how we want to look at that. But the other way to see that also is you will notice that there is a ERP administrator position in the job title as well. That is for any other schools or like region schools or entities that does not utilize PeopleSoft. Right? They can still utilize a more generic title, which is specific to ERP, and use those titles at that point.
Very good. And that might answer the next question is, as new technologies evolve, let's say in the cybersecurity space,
Yep.
if there was an AI systems engineer instead of an IT, would
Correct.
that be something that you would be able to make those shifts laterally for that new technology, or would that then have to retire one and bump people up and all of that?
Yep, that is the idea. Like, I think this working group is not going to stop. I think you have to subject to any review, especially because we are really looking at market study as one of the real driving force of this. So as those positions becomes more popular, as the position becomes more industry standard per se, then we will introduce those into the plan as well and use those to align with our workers.
And then will the state be doing, we're doing a lot of workforce reporting for nurses, but I like to look at the state's workforce reports for all of the positions in the states. Do you see yourself using the standard reporting method that
No, sir.
personnel uses right now? Or do you see OITS or Enterprise IT doing something more individual, showing the workforce across the board?
I think it'll be a hybrid. Because like the Mercer will provide us with a base that is more like statewide, not just statewide, countrywide, right? But then we are in Kansas. We are competing with our neighbor states, right? So I think that requirements will be more specific to agency, like working with Jeff and the other brands, Cito, to figure out what those are and whether they have, like at the end, you will present some challenges, right? Like you don't want to set it too high. The objective here is to set a bare minimum, right? And then let the agency have flexibility to build on that. So I would say something like, let's say, 1 year of programming experience, but I would not specify what kind of programming. But then like your nursing can say like, we use C# or we use PHP. Then you can build on top of that to be more specialized into what you do.
Thank you.
More questions, Senator Pittman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation, Mr. Wong. That's
Thank you.
nice. Few questions and I have to hop, but are you going to distinguish for state workers classified versus unclassified type positions, salaried versus part-time, or I would call it hourly? Are you planning on distinguishing that in the work group?
So right now, because those are FMLA, like some not FMLA, the exempt, non-exempt, that's subjected to federal regulations. So we are not going to change any of those pieces in this working group. It will be mostly focused on just unclassified position and only the job titles with them at the moment.
And then what about, are you going to look at salary ranges across agencies and kind of do a little bit of reporting on that when you look at these kind of, there's going to be discrepancies, obviously.
Yes.
You're looking at?
Absolutely. We are seeking that information from Central HR, where they have a lot of those in the HR database. But yeah, like you said, we're seeing a lot of discrepancy. So we do need to refer to a report like Mercer report or other market study that the other state have done to see if we can match it back to those. And that will be the end, towards the end of this project. Thank you.
Who is Kelly?
Thank you. Alex, thank you for doing this. I mean, it's for somebody that's been around a long time like myself, this is long overdue. And Senator Pittman kind of hit on where I was going to go with the question a little bit, and that's salaries. One thing that I have seen through the time, and we're all IT people and we've all seen them, the only path oftentimes for somebody to get a big raise was they had to start supervising people.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is some of these people probably shouldn't be supervising people, but they're very, very good at what they do. And they're a great individual contributor and should be compensated at that, but there was no path for that.
Yep.
Are you all looking at those type of roles as well? Does that question make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. And Kelly, yes, to answer your other question, we are looking into that. And that's why you see that our approach is to start with the professional job titles, because we understand that is exactly some of the dilemma that people have, is to move up, but not getting into the managerial side. So you will see, like, I will use an example for like programmers. You have 3 individual levels that they can, hopefully we can work something out that they can in position progression. So as long as they hit some of those minimum requirements for level 2, they will promote it and get the raise for level 2 and so forth for level 3. And once they get through with level 3 of programmer, they can see other job families that might be higher in a salary range than what they are in programmer 3. Let's say the position is software architect, where they're still a non-managerial position, but their salary range is higher than the IT programmer position. So that is what we are looking at to produce that path and try to cover the challenges that you have mentioned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions? All right, thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Next is staff reports, the Chief Information Technology Officer updates. And first up is the judicial branch, Kelly O'Brien, the judicial CETO.
Good afternoon, everybody. I apologize for not being there. Timing was bad today. For sake of transparency, I've been on a little bit of leave, but tomorrow actually is my first day to be fully back. So, so just a little bad timing. So, anyways, I'm going to talk a little bit about, as many of you are aware, last October we had what is referred to as a security incident. So I just wanted to kind of give everybody a little bit of update of where we're at. And so to do that, I'll rewind in time a little bit. So I don't really like to think about that too much. Last October 12th to be specific, we determined that we started to have some system issues, and through some initial investigation, it became pretty clear pretty quickly that we had somebody had breached our system and was in there. So of course immediately we did what we were supposed to do. We unplugged, made the phone calls we were supposed to make, and just started the process of trying to figure out exactly what, when, where, all those type of things had happened. So part of doing that, of course, is we did bring in some different, a couple different cybersecurity teams or experts to assist us with that. We of course worked with Jeff and his team. And through that, obviously, I think all of you have read or know that we did find that it did end up, for the longest time, I mean, things move in minutes and seconds and things like this. For the first few weeks, it was difficult to tell exactly what it was, but eventually it was determined that it was ransomware. And we did determine that some data had been exfiltrated. Obviously, well, I don't know if it is obvious, but if you read, of course, one of the questions would be, we made the decision we weren't going to pay the ransom. We did have good backups. We did. They weren't able to access our offsite stuff. I mean, we at the end of the day, when we did finally come back up, we did not lose a minute of time. So we were able to recover and restore everything. And because of that, obviously we decided, that was one of the reasons we decided that we would not pay the ransom. There are many other good reasons not to as well. But as you also are aware, it did take us a while to get back, right? I mean, part of that was part of the investigation. We were told, I just mentioned, we had good backups. We were able to stand up servers in a pretty quick turnaround, but we were told not to come back up so quick, to let the investigation run its course a little bit. And we had to make some decisions. I don't know if many of you understand how we're laid out in the court system. Obviously, there's a district court in every county. There's 105 counties. Some counties have 2 district courts. So we work with 110 different courts. I think you've heard me say this before. When you walk into a court and you're working with that clerk in the court, or you're standing in front of a judge in that court, they are state court people. They are controlled. They are under the Supreme Court. The Chief Justice is their boss. The issue comes is that the computer that they're working on, the pencil they're using, the printer they're printing on is all county. And so there has to be this symbiotic relationship between the courts and the county in working together on these things. And we have always took a more open relationship previously in those things and in regards to connections and things like that. Well, this incident, because of that, we took a much stricter or we have took a much stricter approach. So that took some time, right? We had to work with the counties. We had to put the technologies in place to do that. And that took a little time. So really though, by within 2 or 3 weeks inside of the Judicial Center, we did have what we called public access areas open where people could come in and do work. Clerks could come in and work their paper and get those backloaded. Then by December, we actually had Odyssey up statewide. We did not have e-filing up at that point. We had to do a little bit more work to tighten that up. Then in mid-January, we actually had the whole court system back up. And obviously, as one of the things as I hit on just a couple minutes ago is this relationship with the counties that we're trying to cultivate, because obviously as we tighten things up, trying to work with them, and Greg's in the room and he could speak to this as well. Those counties that already had a security posture, for us to come in and say, no, we want to do this now. There had to be conversations, right? And there had to be some give and take there. And we had to work through some of those things. So one of the things we've done is we've created a cybersecurity committee that has members of the county IT departments and on it that we're going to work together as a group to try to make sure that we're all in agreement kind of how we can proceed forward with these new changes and these new challenges, right? Because we obviously don't want this to happen again, but there's going to be new things that come out that we're going to have to try to deal with, and we just need to be able to work together. So we're really trying to partner more than we have in the past with our county friends out there to make sure that we're just all in agreement with the steps moving forward. And then finally, I'll just end again. I just wanted to thank Jeff and his team for all the help that they provided us through that. It really is a great resource. I said this last time, and I'll say it again. I do hope that none of you ever have to go through this. I can tell you, and that nobody likes it. Frankly, it's I don't know if embarrassing is the right word, but it may be the closest word. Nobody wants to stand up and say that happened to them. But at the end of the day, you can't do it alone. And I learned that. And for with Jeff and Alan even and everybody else, Greg and his team and our other urban counties out there that with their staffs, you know, they all helped, and it was very much appreciated. So I guess the moral of the story is don't go at it alone, or don't try to do it alone. There's a lot of people that understand. I found out that really wanted to help and did help and take advantage of it. So that's all I got, Alan.
All right, is any questions for Kelly? All right, thank you, Kelly.
Yeah.
All right, next up is the executive branch and Jeff Maxson, the executive CETO.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Again, Jeff Maxson, executive branch CETO. A lot of things happening right now and going on in the executive branch. And one of the first things is I want to introduce our new CISO who replaced me as the CISO. So I was able to offload all that from my plate and hand it over to somebody else. Is John Godfrey, who is not a stranger to this committee and has been with the state before, last with KU Med Center as their CISO. And with the other regions institutions at various times. So we're excited to have him. I'm excited to have him take everything off my plate from that perspective, so I get some sleep at night again. But again, glad to have him on the team. I hopefully continue a lot of the work that in progress we've been making in places and clean up a lot of the messes I created at the same time. So glad to have John on board. You'll hear from him here a little bit later. A lot of other exercise, again, really, kind of that job standardization thing as we looked at some of the challenges we're having with recruitment and retention, ways we can kind of clean some things up. What we see is folks move from, one agency to another for $1 raise for something similar. And it's not really, it doesn't do anybody any benefit. It doesn't allow the employee to grow in their career and progression, and then it kind of leaves knowledge gaps in both places, and then it just didn't help the state. So how can we really look at this and seeing some agencies do like a IT support or what's a technology support analyst versus a technology support analyst 1, 2, 3. Well, the one at one agency has a complete set of what their functions are, what are different than another agency's, and there's a $20,000 difference between agencies, and so it wasn't setting people up for success. So this is kind of one of the big drivers we're doing behind that. Also, as we can also standardize and understand looking big picture. If we have a situation like Kelly did, we can go look out at a listing of people and their job titles and kind of understand their skill sets and say, hey, for continuity, we need you to go help over here. Like right now, if we did that, we literally have to go ask individual people what their job sets and skills were to try and identify resource. So there's continuity reasons as to why we're doing that as well. So it's just a lot of things going into that, but that's just kind of one of the things that we've been working on. We have our data center RFP that we're working through is to do our next iteration of what our new data center looks like here for Kansas. We're working on identity and access management RFP that hopefully will be standardizing soon and awarding. So just a lot of busy things going on, obviously with legislative session occurring. So it's just, there's no slowing down in the moment. So really trying to evaluate kind of next steps too of what it looks like and really be citizen focused on technology. How do we start truly moving from an IT perspective to a service organization, but also changing IT's focus to making sure, we're looking also at what the citizens' needs are to help kind of steer where we kind of move IT towards and work with the business units in the agency. So a lot of shifting of what the conversation has been in the past of surviving the COVID era. And we're now at this point where we are taking the next look at what is our next kind of generation of IT look like for the state. So a lot that's happening. But with that, that's really my update for today. So.
All right, any questions for Jeff?
So I don't really have a question, but just more of a comment. And this might not be the right time to segment in this, but I'm sorry, Mike made it with the city of Wichita. I was just informed that a grant went through the Department of Commerce. It was about cybersecurity. I found out about it from our EcoDevo department head. I would have hoped that Department of Commerce maybe would have sent information out to the cybersecurity task force to to let those folks know about that. Because I get an email out of the blue that I didn't know anything about around cybersecurity across the state and whether we wanted to be engaged with it. It's more of a communication issue from my perspective, that it would be good that if we knew about those types of things. Similar item around water systems. I don't know what that looks like at the state level, and I get it. It's a large organization and fairly complex, but I would just like to throw out there that I think it's important that we try and figure out how we can improve the communication channels. So there's better information, especially on topics as Kelly just kind of brought up, right? We're here to help each other, and when you're talking about cybersecurity, I think that's kind of imperative, and communicating doesn't cost anything. So just kind of my 2 cents from our perspective in terms of how we find out about some things.
Thanks for that comment, Mike. Yeah, that is something that is on our list of working on. Yeah, right now, unfortunately, there's a lot of money flowing through various grant programs and projects and with different agencies, and that stuff we're still trying to get our arms wrapped around as well. So I don't know which specifically one that you're talking about with KDC, but I know, for example, there's a lot of stuff tied to cyber and broadband development. But again, it's just there's a lot of nuances that we're not all in tune with. We're trying our best. We'll work to do better and make sure we're kind of coordinating as much of that as possible.
Any further questions for Jeff? All right, thank you, Jeff. Next up is the legislative branch, Alan Wise, legislative CETO, and that is me. Our legislative systems, our KLIS modernization project, just a reminder, our KLIS system, that's our large suite of custom applications that does all our bill processing and most of the associated documents and the statute updates for the state. That project is in development and testing is continuing on that. Our next user acceptance testing phase will begin in May, and we're still on track to implement that system, which is scheduled in October 2024 to be used in the 25 session. And we will be starting planning for phase 2 shortly after the session ends this year. Also like to recognize a couple of staff that came over with me today. Eric Teal. Eric, wave to the council. He is our Director of Application Services. He's also the project manager on this modernization project. And also John Langer, raise your hand. He is our Director of Technical Services, which is responsible for all the infrastructure systems in our State House. Just some notes on the legislative session itself. It's, of course, continuing. There's a deadlines document on the legislative website on the left navigation if you want to look at how the schedule is for the rest of the session. Thursday, March 28th is a deadline for second House consideration. That's where Senate bills need to pass the House and vice versa. And there is no session on Friday, March 29th, which is a legislative holiday. And then the first adjournment is Friday, April 5th, which they go into the 3-week April break. And then I'll come back for the veto session on Monday, April 29th of this year to finish up. So I can answer any questions if there are any on this update. All right, thank you all. Next up is the CISO update, John Godfrey.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. John Godfrey, CISO for the executive branch, and I'd like to share a few updates with you today. Across the last month, we've seen a variety of cyber attacks, starting first with financially motivated or driven attacks. And these types of attacks include simple phishing emails, impersonation of vendors, the use of similar domain names to submit fake invoices for payment, and potential payroll directs. And so this is just a reminder to make sure that you're implementing robust mechanisms to vet requests for changes and that you use a two-step identity verification method to prevent fraud attempts. Most recently, though, we've seen an increase in the exploitation of public-facing critical infrastructure services. An example would be your VPN system, web gateway, telephony system, proxies, and more. And the need here is to ensure that very timely patching of these externally facing systems becomes a critical component of your IT operations. Best practice would suggest that patching within 24 hours of the release of a vendor's patch is what's needed. Additionally, this is a reminder too for basic cyber hygiene components and how important they are. And I know you're like, well, the basics, right? But the basics are really important. And we've seen this in some recent attacks as well. Things like removing user accounts that no longer exist, ensuring strong passwords, rotating your passwords on a periodic basis, ensuring that privileges are scoped appropriately for your user accounts, and especially in domain structures that you may have. Coupled with the cyber hygiene that I've mentioned, the need for multi-factor authentication on these externally facing and critical systems remains large. By focusing on these components, we can definitely reduce our ability for threat actors to use techniques. We can reduce the ability for threat actors to use techniques like living off the land. Well, I didn't want to get too far into the election season piece since we heard a great briefing earlier. I did want to mention that with it nearing upon us, the rise in misinformation and disinformation will likely increase. More sophisticated attacks will use artificial intelligence to make these misinformation campaigns appear to be more real or believable, potentially including things like deep fakes. Lastly, advanced persistent threat groups continue to pre-position themselves through a variety of methods and through living off the land techniques on IT networks. And really they're waiting to be able to create disruptive or destructive cyber activity against our critical infrastructure. All right, now that we got the scary stuff out of the way, right, I want to switch gears here for a moment and share with you our annual Kansas Public Sector Cybersecurity Summit. There we go, got it. This year marks the third annual summit, and you, of course, are invited. In partnership with Government Technology, the 2024 Kansas Cybersecurity Summit will return to Wichita, Kansas on April 17 and April 18. This event is open to public sector employees from across the state, and we've made a few changes this year, beginning with a half-day operational technology training on April 17th. The training will help identify operational technology, look at threats and hazards, and help you identify how to secure your operational technology environment. Our day-long cybersecurity summit will follow on April 18th with a host of keynotes and panelists covering topics from resiliency planning to cyber education. The second change to this year's summit, and should be a happy change, is that there's no fee to register. So we look forward to seeing you there, and I appreciate the opportunity to give you a quick brief.
Any questions for John? Adrian?
Yes, Adrian Guerrero with the non-cabinet agencies. Do we have any update on the multi-factor authentication grant, I guess is what it would be? And when it might be possible?
Yeah, so this is Jeff Maxon, Executive Branch CTO. Again, that is in procurement right now to finalize the RFP. And once that is awarded officially and contract signed, hopefully here in the next couple weeks, we'll be rolling stuff out as quickly as possible.
Any further questions? All right, thank you, John. Next section is comments from the board members. Are there any comments?
Sorry, I don't mean to take all the time. Adrian with the non-cabinet agencies. I had a question from a couple agency directors that are looking at potentially utilizing some AI and generative type technologies to supplement or assist them in different ways in their agencies. And one of the questions that one of the directors had was whether or not the state was going to look at any sort of solution, whether or not it be Microsoft's Copilot or following the lead of Pennsylvania using OpenAI to be able to do that, and does it fit within the scheme of the AI policy the state has?
Jeff?
Jeff Maxon, Executive Branch CETO again. So right now, there are no plans to have a state kind of curated generative AI platform at the moment, but that's not to say it's not going to happen. It's just the use cases haven't popped up for us to pursue it yet. So if there's more use cases coming to us like that, then we'll start exploring that. Some of the next steps we're looking at is trying to bring in some vendors and do some kind of use cases and demonstrations on what potential use cases might be for agencies to see how they could implement and include things, because there are numerous possibilities. Most vendors are bringing solutions that already have the generative AI in place with constraints of our policy. And I shouldn't say they're really constraints, but vendors just have a couple things they need to demonstrate to us to say yay or nay, whether it's a good solution or not. So, the framework is pretty flexible in what it is. We're still looking to explore, but we haven't had the use cases come to us yet specifically. So like if you have more of them, we're more than happy to look at them and start evaluating. Part of that also too comes back to is the next, how do those things get funded? So again, having some sort of model, because there would be a chargeback mechanism with that, things like that. That I believe, in my opinion, is the shoe has not dropped on what the cost of generative AI is. It's still in kind of that infancy. So a lot of vendors are kind of giving it away. I believe they'll come back with charges once you're kind of hooked on it, that are probably going to see exponentially grow. We're starting to see cloud costs grow increasingly and go up. So we'll see that kind of happen concurrently with adoption of generative AI as well. So,
And kind of along that same lines, we've also had some discussions about RPA and whether or not, I believe it's state of Tennessee, we saw a demonstration at NASCIO, them offering solutions for RPA of different processes and whether or not that would be a service offering of OITS.
define or robotic process, so automation and stuff. Yeah. So again, a lot of stuff isn't necessarily new. And places like AI, for example, or machine learning is what it was called, has been in use by the state for a long time, especially in like the cybersecurity space. So it's whatever the use cases are, and we can go bring solutions if those use cases are identified, or go help find solutions. But it's just there has to be a need and a way to support it. So
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other comments?
Good afternoon, Greg Gann, County Representative. I have two comments. One, just follow up on AI. We have a few position openings at Sedgwick County that we're attracting a good number of applicants in the range of 50 to 70 per position, which I think is fantastic. It gives us a great opportunity to really find the best candidate. But what we're noticing are a significant number of very similar applications, resumes almost to the dotted I, the crossed T. And when you get into the metadata, you discover that the submitter is not the originator of that document. So, and we've seen this in a couple of different areas, and there's actually a news reporter that did a what if story and actually did that, started submitting job applications so using AI. So it's something to keep in mind, something to take a moment to slow down and look a little closer at what's coming across your desk. The other thing I'd like to say is I would like to concur with Kelly O'Brien. A lot of things happened since October, but before that, there was already great synergy between the county level and OJA in partnering and making Odyssey a reality. And that synergy continues to grow and manifest itself in quite positive ways. The District Court Security Steering Committee has already met at least once, and I found it highly productive. I think we're moving in the right direction, got the right people involved. There's a lot of listening and a lot of understanding of what it's like at everybody's particular service area. So I feel very positive and very strongly that we're going in the right direction. And I would concur with Kelly, and I thank him and his team.
All right, more comments? All right, well, I have a comment. Alan Wise, Legislative CETO. Sort of an announcement. This will be my last ITEC meeting. I am retiring from service with the state on June 7th of this year. So I just wanted to say it's been an honor to work with this council and many other IT organizations across the state. It's been very exciting to be part of it. And I wish you all well in continuing this effort. So thank you. Thank you. All right, any other comments? All right, next is closing remarks. And Alex Wong, do we have any new action items?
We do not have any action item.
All right, and that should close our list out of current action items too, I believe. So,
That is correct.
okay. So I believe that concludes our meeting, and without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you all.